Hello, everybody. Grant Hunter here for another Product Growth Leaders Conversations. Steve, as we work with our clients, we get a whole bunch of different tool sets, right? Some people are using basic generalist tools like Monday.com. Some people are on Product Board or whatever. Seems like a lot of people are using analytics tools like Pendo and that type of stuff. And it made me think we should probably have this conversation. We haven't had this conversation on Product Conversations yet about product management tools. I mean, in your long experience in product management, I mean, what have you seen as the evolution of product management tools?
Oh, I think we're all still using Excel, PowerPoint, and Word or the Google equivalent. I used to say that you could tell what kind of a product manager somebody was based on what was the first tool they opened when they were starting a project. A marketing guy, a product marketing guy would open PowerPoint first, and an analytic guy would open Word first, and a strategy guy would open Excel first. So it's like, which PowerPoint which Microsoft Office type of product are you?
Yeah, well, in this day and age, it's Microsoft Office or Google Workplace or Workspace. I always get that name. They've changed so many times what the name of their suite is. To have this conversation, we have an amazing panel. As always, Wong is joining Steve and I, and I just have to call it a rock star panel, especially for a topic on product management tools. Gilley from Gartner and John Cutler, from John Cutler. A beautiful mess. One of the best product management, one of my favorite reads out there. So we put a question out there, and actually, Cliff, you inspired it because you had shared some stuff. I don't know if you and Saeed were debating or what, but it was a conversation in the comments about ROI of tools. And I know you've done some reporting on that. So it really inspired, but simply we asked the question to the community, what tools are you using? And we actually did a survey. And in our prep for this, John had actually said, my guess is that Google Suite is going to be the most used product management road mapping tool. And he was close. It was PowerPoint. In the survey, it was 60% of the people, 56%, it changed, somebody else voted. 56% of the people chose PowerPoint or Excel as a platform. It was not unique. You could choose multiple things. The Atlassian Jira Suite was at 48%, AHA 24%, Notion 16%, Google Slides and Sheets at 12%. So I guess the combined Google or Microsoft version of a presentation software in Excel was more than 2/3. Is that a surprise? I'll start with you, John, because you would sort of put that out there. Obviously, you thought that was the case. Is that what you see as you work with people?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that both full time and with working with folks. And in fact, even if the company says they use one of these tools, there's a whole shadow tool economy of what the PMs are actually using. So yeah. I didn't think the Microsoft angle, but yeah, available Office type tools did not surprise me. I mean, one thing, having done this, I worked at Amplitude for a long time. We did a lot of surveys on the tools people use. There are analytics tools, there are BI tools, there are other things that people, I mean, roadmaps to one company means a completely different thing than roadmaps to another company. I've seen companies run their whole business out of just long Google Docs, and that works out fine. And, when I was in-house, like, these no-code tools are actually really effective at the moment. You can pretty much replicate most $150,000 pieces a year software in Coda or Notion when it comes to what you need to do for product, and have much more flexibility, which you probably need when you're doing like product ops at scale kind of stuff. So yeah, it's a funny tool space that people are navigating at the moment.
I think that John should copyright that term, shadow tool economy, because it really gets into what's going on. And I think that's what I've seen as well. Even if people have a product board or a RoadMonk or an AHA in there, they're still using, like, if they're presenting the leadership team or the board, they're still doing that out of a PowerPoint thing. They're doing that type of stuff. Cliff, your thoughts. I mean, you've written a little bit about, you see the ROI on this. Doesn't the shadow tool economy take away that ROI?
I don't. So I don't think so. I
Okay.
think it may minimize the ROI, but I don't think it completely takes it away. I think, and we see the same things in our surveys at Gartner, right? Is not as many people as we would like are using purpose-built tools for product management. And I think the ROI is pretty obvious. If you take, I did a research note on this and came up with a like $187,000 return on a $4,800 investment, right? The ROI is there, and there were some assumptions in there. You can cut that in half, you can cut that in a quarter. It doesn't, even at a quarter, you're like at I can't do the math anyway. You're at like 50,000. You're at like 10 times return, right, on investment, and
Yep.
and any other department in the world, if they could show a 10 times in return on investment, would get funding for a tool like that. But
Yeah.
product management doesn't. And I think that's what drives this. To me, it's always been less about the desire to use these tools. When you talk to product managers, they kind of want to use the tools. It's been about the inability to get the budget, to get the funding, to get past IT, who says, well, we pay so little for PowerPoint and Excel and Microsoft and Word, or we pay you so little for Google Sheets and Google Docs that isn't that good enough, right? And the answer is no, it's not in many cases. And maybe Notion is the right choice for you, maybe Figma is the right choice for you, but some tool other than PowerPoint is really the effective one. Now, if you have to distill that down to 5 slides to do an exec presentation, that's not hard. What is hard is maintaining the PowerPoint deck that goes into marketing, that they're using a version from 3 years ago, that sales is using a version from 2 months ago, that another salesperson took the PowerPoint and added their own things to it, right? That's the problem, is there's no one source of truth when you start using general productivity tools and productivity suites. Throughout my entire 20 some odd year career, right? I've used SharePoint, I've used Jira, I've used Team Foundation Server. I built a whole product management process twice in Team Foundation Services. That's insane because it's not.
It is actually.
It's an issue tracking tool. It's a work tracking tool for developers. Jira is a work tracking tool for developers. It is not a roadmap tool. Can you bend it, twist it, tie it in knots, and make it look like a roadmap? Sure. But it doesn't connect strategy to planning, to execution, to post-release follow-up. It doesn't do any of those things. So you have to build your own process over the tools.
And actually, May, before I get to it, you're a product operations person. I'd love to get your take, because John had talked about the tools for product as part of product operations. Where's your head on this?
So you see this all the time in the product ops communities. Whenever someone is new and they get brought on as a product ops person, especially as it's starting up, almost always their first task is to do the roadmap, right? Like, so your first instinct is, well, I know that there are road mapping tools out there. And so you go on the forums and you say, what's the best road mapping tool? And I keep telling people that is the wrong question, because there is no such thing as a road mapping tool. Like, there are things that are branded as a road mapping tool, but what they really are product management platforms. They cover every single facet of product management, or at least attempt to, or at least are scaling to that platform. And therefore, you are buying in to their idea of what product management should look like. And should you adopt that tool, you are basically buying into some semblance of their framework, whether you like it or not. And you haven't had time to figure out what your product culture is. And so therefore, by buying into this road mapping tool, you are essentially setting yourself up to set your entire organization to do what these tools tell you to do. And sometimes it's not a bad thing, right? Sometimes if your product culture is so far behind, it is great to hop onto something and use it as leverage to shift. It's like, oh, the tool needs us to do this. The tool needs us to publicly prioritize. The tool needs us to publicly share this roadmap. So therefore we can do that. Like it's a great way to leverage that change, that cultural shift. But in order to do enough research to understand what's generally needed, and when all you need is just a roadmap, it seems like a lot because your boss tells you to put together a roadmap, and you're like, okay, well, I need this $100,000 a year tool.
I mean, a couple things. May, I remember when we first started working, talking with you when we were doing some of the product ops stuff 3 years ago. I know at least two heads of product ops whose whole budget was trying to integrate AHA with Jira, right?
Yep.
I mean,
well, in the great SaaS product house cleaning that's happening at the moment, I'm talking to companies that are letting go of hundreds of thousands of dollars of repeated and duplicated tools that someone bought into at some point, thinking this tool, to May's point, was going to solve all of their product maturity problems. I don't know. I think that there is a bit of I'm sure that the ROI is there, but people are looking very, very carefully at the ROI of things in their companies right now and opting to let go of a lot of them. So
well, the ROI is only there if you use the tool properly. Right. And, I don't mean properly by like there's a set way to, but like to May's point, if your first job is to create a roadmap and you go out and grab AHA, you're going to be in trouble because AHA is super complicated and is built on a concept of going from strategy to planning to execution and being able to track all the way through. Now, whether they fulfill that promise, I'm not recommending any of these vendors. I have to say that since I'm a Gartner analyst, I'm not discounting any of these vendors. Product Board is a total opposite approach, right? They go from insights, which are sourced from other tools like Salesforce and Zendesk and things like that you kind of copy insights and paste it into this and make those connections, right? You can't. It's very difficult to justify these tools if all you're doing is building a roadmap. Right?
Is this
easy if you're talking about this is a strategic approach to product management? But to May's point, you have to get to that understanding of what your product management philosophy is in order to implement those tools.
So a couple things that came out. Pendo showed up in the product management platform road mapping at 12%. They're adding some of those things. Atlassian was at 48%. Obviously, when you look at product analytics, Pendo was at 36%. Our platform type plays is the platform play. If people are sort of taking these best of breeds and getting rid of some of them, as John's talking about.
No, what's happening is these companies need to grow.
Okay.
And the only way they're growing is branding themselves as platform products.
Okay.
And they're having a lot of trouble growing because they are also being downsized and losing their average contract value. So more than one leader I've met out there is like, I'm tired of funding the ACVs of all these SaaS companies that have taken a big hit in the last N number of years. Realistically, that's what's happening. And I'm saying that too, from the standpoint of someone who's worked at multiple of those companies. It's really hard to be in B2B SaaS at the moment offering these tools. So, more than one leader said, I do not want to spend, that there are OKR tools that cost more than $100,000 a year. And you can build the OKR tool in Coda over the weekend. And the OKR tool never really helped anyone do anything anyway, because some chief of staff just used it to just get everyone to fill out a spreadsheet.
And they're doing OKRs the wrong way.
Adding value anyway. So if you're a company in that type of situation, like, what are you going to do?
No, it's true. And I was thinking, go ahead.
No. I think it's a tough situation all around at the moment, from the providers to also the companies that they're selling to are under pressure to cut costs as well. And so, and any company with more than 150 people is probably doing 8 different styles of product anyway.
Yeah.
So whenever I do these activities with companies, there's, 15 plus shapes of work in the company. There's massive projects down to teams that are iterating every single day. A good point is at Atlassian, they do not require you to use Jira.
Oh, wow.
The only tools you need to use are Confluence and a product called Atlas, which is very agnostic to how you work.
That's interesting.
So any company of any size has a choice between either deciding on a way that everyone is going to do, which means that probably no one's going to actually do it, and they're just going to use their own shadow techniques anyway, or having something that's very agnostic and or building things that kind of cater to the different groups. It's just like a tough time at the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting. Steve, one of the things May was talking about takes me back to, I don't know how old John and Cliff are. I know how old May is, but I grew up in like the 90s in the ERP days. And it was like SAP, it's like you either do it our way or you spend $15 million on implementation. I think back to your mainframe days and was wondering, has this ever changed with software? Is it always been our way, the software provider's way, or are you going to have to spend a lot of money to make it work?
I think it's changed a lot since then. So back in the days of product management tools, right in the 2000s, we had Pivotal, right? And if you bought Pivotal Tracker, you bought Pivotal Consulting and Pivotal Training and Pivotal this and Pivotal that. You did everything the Pivotal way, and the tool wasn't flexible enough to do anything but the Pivotal way. We're not in that bad of a world in product management tools anymore, right? You can buy AHA and tweak it and use it and kind of bend it and twist it a little bit to get to kind of what you think it should do. If you know what you want to do, you can bend and twist other tools. So it's not the strict, buy Pivotal, buy Pivotal, buy Pivotal, buy Pivotal, do Pivotal. Or there were a couple others out there back in the days.
Steve, what was the one that I know that we've talked about some from the aughts? Yes, I said.
Well, I was thinking of the SAP story of SAP would come in and the client would say, well, how long will it take you to do this? And SAP would say, it'll take us 2 months to encode your process. And then the buyer would say, oh, shit, we don't have a process. And they're like, let me rephrase. It will take us 2.5 years to figure out your process. And then it will take us 2 months to encode it. And I think I see that all the time. It's people are like, as you guys were saying, it's like, we want a road mapping tool. Well, hang on. We need to start with what are your expectations and outcomes for product management? What is your process? And then is there a tool that supports that process?
Yep.
I was going to say that product management people have a sickness, which is they're terribly good at applying product thinking externally, but terrible at applying product design thinking internally into their own companies.
I would say that's what Chris.
There's like 15 jobs of a road mapping tool. Like a big company-wide Gantt chart is not the same thing as insights, is not the same thing as strategy to action, is not the same thing as capacity planning, is not the same thing as quarterly planning, is not the same thing as OKRs. And yet these tools just bundle them all together. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard.
One other thing, though, because we've been talking about these like $100,000 investments, and product management tools don't really cost that much. If you look at they can, they can, John. Don't get me wrong, they can if you make the wrong purchasing decisions and you make the wrong licensing decisions, they absolutely can. But if you focus in, and even on 1 or 2 teams, and yes, at the large enterprise size, absolutely it can cost $10,000, $50,000, $100,000. But if you're a 5-person team and you're trying to adopt these tools, that's barely $10,000 a year, right? For 5 people. Like this is we shouldn't be asking. We're not asking for a lot, but yet we can't seem to break through the barriers. I don't get that.
Okay, but we're not talking about 5-person teams here, right? Like the purpose, the impetus behind the roadmap is usually people are upset. The reason why your product leader wants a roadmap is because people are upset and people keep calling up every single product manager and saying, when am I getting that feature? And they don't even know about that feature.
But you're going to do roadmaps anyway, right? That's a standard deliverable.
Well, standard deliverable, but for whom? Right?
There's different deliverables out of that.
Different audiences, many different audiences.
Yeah, but many different audiences, but they want different things from the roadmap, right? So there's the roadmap that's for sales to understand what's coming in the next 3 quarters, and that's all they care about. Or sorry, 3 months, I should say, not 3 quarters. There is the roadmap for leadership to take it to their investors and say, hey, here are all the shiny things that we're actually doing. So we are a market leader, and we are going to be even more of a market leader. And then there is the roadmap for development to say, we're not staffed up for this.
But that's actually exactly why these tools are important, is because they provide a single source of truth from which you can branch off different messages. So I don't have to build a roadmap for development and a roadmap for marketing and a roadmap for sales and a roadmap for investors. I can theoretically now, and I've actually had success doing this, so I will say you can do it. You can have that single source of truth and create different reports off of it that show things at different levels of abstraction. So the investors do not need to know the sprint by sprint plan for execution of 5 different projects all at the same time. They need to know the thematic things that we're doing and why we think that's important, what changes they think.
But this goes back to the whole
AI in our product.
Yeah,
it's the only thing they care about right now.
Yep. And when will it be done?
John, you were gonna say something, I think, when Cliff was talking.
Well, no. At my prior role at Toast, we actually call this the 25 form problem, and this has been in other companies that I've been at, which is basically every partner team needs a slice of the data. Now, I think that the reality, this is more of like a physics problem, but you can just go figure it out. So let's say you've got 20 partners internally, they need their own slice of the data. It is tempting to believe they all need to know the name of the roadmap item. But actually, when you looked at, and after surveying their forms, there were often 25 slightly different variations of the same amount of data. And so then you had product teams also often taking very diverse approaches. So they needed something from the data too. So I think one of the most important things in any company you can do, put on your product management hat, is to think that there are some jobs to be done here. Most individual PMs could care less. The slide is the easiest thing for them to do, except they don't want to fill out 25 forms. However, the 20 people needing the forms need the specific slices of information. So if you put on your sort of thinking hat for it in an organization, I think it's almost like an irreconcilable problem that you can do better at than worse at. It's like one of those intractable problems that's a balancing act between those two groups, but you can do a better job of it than a worse job.
And let me reflect back on my 5-person team first of all, because I know we're not really talking about 5
people on this call. We wouldn't need a roadmap to just get on this call every day.
No, I meant 5-person product management teams, not 5-person companies. Yeah. Definitely, you do not need a roadmap tool at a 5-person company.
But when you get the 5 people in the product management team, you now get to the place that there's 5 people doing things differently that creates friction.
And that's so. The other part of that five product managers, and I work with large and global enterprise companies. I know none of them have a 5-person product management. Well, actually, some of them do, and that's scary. But my point was that 5-person team is my first team to use the tool. I'm not going to buy a tool and instantly try to do an enterprise-wide transformation to make every single one of my 250 product managers use that tool. That is insane and will fail from day one. What I want to do is find the team, and I've done this this is how I approach my agile transformations. I find the team that's most likely to succeed, that's going to have a moderate to minimal impact on what's going on, and I get them to do the things because they want to do it, they're good at it, they're not going to severely impact the bottom line, and they're my example for everyone else. So I approach this the same way. If I want to get budget for product management tools, let me find the 5 product managers in the organization that want to do this, that are hyped to do this, that are energetic about it. It's not going to completely derail everything. And that's a $10,000 ask, right? Why can't I get, this is the fundamental problem that has always baffled me, right? And someone mentioned it in the chat. Marketing says I need a tool and finance says cool. Sales says I need a tool and finance says cool. Developers say I need a tool and finance says cool. Product says I need a tool. If I say, whoa, hey, wait, hang on a minute. I don't know if there's a return on investment on that, right? and it's the typical thinking of sales and marketing are revenue generators. They're a revenue center, and product is a cost center.
Which is such a fallacy. But I mean, I'll go back to I go to Drucker often, right? And Drucker says, well, the aim of marketing is to know and understand the customer so well your product or service fits themselves. That's really product management. And he says innovation is about creating something new that transmutes. I don't like the word transmute. He says transmutes value, right? He says the only functions a company needs are marketing, know and understand the customer so well your product or service fits them, and innovation, create something new. What he's saying is all you need, the core function is product management, right? And product development for helping create the innovation side. It's just, I believe that this comes down to the lack of understanding of the true role of product management. Brand management would never have this issue at a Procter & Gamble.
Nope. And similar to product ops, it's the same thing I say for product ops. Marketing has an ops role. Sales has an ops role. Dev has DevOps roles. Why is it so insane that a product team would want an ops role to help support them in what they're trying to achieve?
We need to write the
Your
Phoenix
CEO
Project.
has a chief of staff, right? They have someone doing a lot of the day-to-day mundane stuff to keep the CEO and executives working, right? But when product says we'd like to have a product ops person, now it's like, oh, I don't know if we can afford that headcount.
I feel like we found a topic that Cliff really wanted to rant on.
I will rant on pretty much any topic related to product management. Steve knows this.
I want to, we've been having an amazing conversation. In the data, something stuck out to me, and maybe it shouldn't because I just should realize this is the way it is. Over a third of the people, when asked about which product analytics or telemetric solution is your organization using, said we're not using anything. And so I'm going to go to John on this because, you come from that world. 36% said they don't do anything. 36% said Pendo. Mixpanel was next, and then a trail of stuff. Is it surprising to you that there's still more than a third of companies not doing anything with analytics?
Well, I mean, first of all, people often don't see all the tools they're actually using for analytics. So often product people aren't aware of the warehousing costs and the things that BI teams and other, like the analytics that your marketing team uses a lot of analytics to do that. The other thing, the analogy that I use here is that in research we did in Amplitude, let's say you were to go to like a major, rapidly growing sort of darling product company. If you total up all the money they are spending on decision quality and decision velocity, like analysts, researchers, warehousing costs, the tools, the self-service tools that people use, they might be spending $30,000, $50,000, $70,000 per employee on decision quality.
Wow.
Now, I'm saying you have to think about the spend. The spend's not always in tools. It might be in an analyst. Like they might have an analyst per 30 designers, product managers, and engineers. And so do the math, like that's right there is $10,000 or something per employee and doing that. Now, if you're to take a company, one of these sort of non-digital product companies, they will have like one analyst per 200 people. And they will use much slower tools for business intelligence, things that can't give you real-time data that require someone to write queries and put it in Tableau. They might spend $5,000 or $1,000 per person. So the issue at the moment is more like, it's just like product stuff. People put the tools are just one part of it, but like how much investment per R&D employee are you making for developer experience, product experience, operational experience, platform experience? And I think that the issue is that distribution is just so huge. The difference between 50 and 5,000 and 50,000 and maybe 500 for some teams. So it's not surprising at all based on research that we did. It's just, you have to think about it as the total appetite for the company to spend. And a lot of this spend just happens because in the rapidly growing company I mentioned, people wouldn't work there if they didn't have access to those tools.
Yeah.
The big joke about the Marty Kagan thing where he's like, well, we don't need program managers and all those things is all the companies he cites spend lavishly on program management, project management, business analysts, product operations. And then when these non-digital product companies try to hire those same roles, they're chastised for trying to hire product ops and things. So like, it's just sort of, that's my impression. It's like the total appetite and the baseline appetite and baseline appreciation for the value of these things. I like to say about ROI calculators that the minute a company's using an ROI calculator usually means that there's a problem, because it means that they don't inherently understand the value of things. The companies
Yeah.
spending $50,000 on analytics per engineer do not look at ROI calculators. The ones that spend $500 to $5,000 per engineer are obsessed about ROI calculators. So
Yeah.
that's the challenge.
No, I think for me, what surprised me there, and maybe this is my bias, right? We all have our own biases. When I work with a client, I often ask questions about that the telemetric can provide. And it's like, if you can't answer these questions, right, how do you make decisions on what features are being used or not used? I mean, the famous 80% of features are rarely, if ever, used report. I strategically use it as a cudgel when I'm talking to people about they're working on the wrong things. But I also realize that, most companies, now I know that over a third of companies don't even probably have that level of detail into it. So
Yeah.
it was an interesting surprise.
So I started my product adjacent stuff in on-prem in the on-prem environment, right? So analytics is a lot harder there because you have no idea how many people are using your software. You have no idea how they're using your software unless if you manage to tag along with services support or success if you have it at a legacy organization, right? So there are barriers to analytics, but also it's trying to find out that information. But I want to talk about a scenario where we didn't have analytics and then we had analytics, right? And you can really see the change in how product managers approach product management before and after. Before, it was always frustrating. You always have to ask all the people about, like, oh, what is the actual thing that's happening? And then you give everyone access to Looker, you give everyone access to Pendo, and all of a sudden they're self-organizing. How do we look at data events? Like, I didn't need to do anything. We gave them access, and they started talking about how do we use data. They started doing show and tells about like really cool data things that they've uncovered. This really cool data mapping thing that one researcher did in Miro, and it's just and it opened up all of our eyes about what we can do with these tools. And it's not about the specific tool, it's about having access, period.
Yeah.
Like knowing, like it's access to data, access to insights, be it like a physical visit to a client site if that's a thing that impacts your products, or even just talking to customers, or access to subject matter experts across the company, because sometimes people don't like to talk to each other. But that access to that information so that you at least have the option to look at what's possible.
Yeah.
I think that's critical to doing great product management.
This
The
is something I see in all the training that I do. One person will say, we'll be talking about, how do you get market discovery and how many times you visit customers and do you look at customer support logs and whatever. And somebody will invariably say, well, I get a lot of good information out of Salesforce. And maybe that's true. But the funny part is 19 people go, how the hell do you have access to Salesforce? Well, I used to be a sales engineer, and they didn't take away my login, right? Somebody else goes, oh yeah, that's a good point, because I've got, I get a lot of good information out of the support ticketing system, and 19 people say, how do you have access to the ticketing system? Well, I used to be in customer support. And it's just amazing to me that we're asking people to drive a car with no dashboard.
I think
go ahead, Cliff, and then I got to follow.
Our research at Gartner matches what you guys are saying, right? That roughly 2/3 of people don't use product analytics. But I think the other piece of this, and I talk with clients about this all the time, especially again, that large global enterprise, they buy the tool, they put the tool in, they collect all the data, but they have no idea what they're looking for, right? It's the opposite of May's experience, where
It's a haystack.
once you open the door, it's just so much data that's it's structured but unstructured, and there's no one aside from the professional services of the company that they bought the software from to help them experience that value. So it's kind of a two-edged sword. If you have people who have theories about the data, and someone mentioned this in the chat, right? Have hypotheses about the data, are data legible, they can understand data, they understand the value, they know maybe basic query techniques and things like that, yeah, you can be really successful. But if you have none of that, and there are companies out there that have none of that, then nothing about these product analytics tools helps. And in fact, I've talked with many people who are like, oh, we tried Heat 5 years ago and it failed, so we're not in, well, there's no appetite in the environment now, even though now we have people who know what they would be doing with it. In large enterprises, they have a long elephant long memory. And
Yeah.
if they paid money for something that didn't deliver value 5 years ago, you are not going to convince them to spend money on anything related to that again for like 15 or 20 years.
A couple things here. A, Cliff mentioned the chat. On our stream here from StreamYard, we see some of them. Sometimes we don't see. We have like a killer panel just in the chat. Marlon Davis, Chris Allback, Jenny Wenger. Some of the most amazing people are having a side chat there. So make sure if you're not on LinkedIn, go find it on LinkedIn. You can see and join that chat that's going on there. Chris pointed out for all that data, AI may help. But the question, John had said something earlier about how like the great reckoning for SaaS, B2B SaaS companies and how people are downsizing. And it made me think about what Basecamp was doing with Campfire, right? How they're now going back to offering it as an on-prem license and maintenance solution. And I'm going to tie this to, I was talking to a client in the B2B content space. In their discovery, they found that academic libraries were totally maxed out on their subscription budgets, but had a lot of money to buy actual like lifetime, like, and so they've actually started creating products that were selling, to sell things to tap that budget. Is there going to be a reckoning for the subscription model? And are people, is this Basecamp Campfire thing a canary, like, or is it a red herring? I mean, which way does it go? Do you think we're going to see, I don't worry about the whole industry. I was thinking about the product management industry specifically, because we can talk about that. Are we going to see it change? Is on-prem going to be a thing again, or on my local cloud?
I think that more likely you'll see innovation in the pricing models for these products to be more, look, investors through the late 2010s were telling every one of their portfolio companies to go multi-product. That was literally their bar for whether you were a good company, is whether you were adding products. So you see when someone does insights and all these, we're going to do goals, we're going to do insights, we're going to do all this stuff. There's a lot of pressure for those companies once they got money to add all those particular products. However, I would say I'm going to point this company out because not as an endorsement of this company, but I just think there are people being more thoughtful about it in having a second round. Like there's a company called Air Focus. And again, it's not an endorsement of their product, but they're just like a little later into the game and they're being a little bit more thoughtful about the structuring of their product, especially as it scales for teams, kind of learning from some of the mistakes from people in the past about how they go about it. And I'm just using that as there's generations of companies and you're seeing people who are not as early into the game kind of responding to that thing. Another great example is like even Atlassian is innovating. So my favorite product management product of the last couple of years is an Atlassian product called Atlas, because it solved a problem really gracefully. And I think they folded it into their suite now and maybe combine it with Jira Product Discovery and other things. But everyone rags on Atlassian. Jira Product Discovery and Atlas, I liked them, So I'm just saying that you're seeing the market, do little spot problems like Atlas, but doing this very generalized model. You're seeing people a little later into the game appreciating the problem of extensibility in interesting ways. And so I think we'll see just more, we'll see just different offerings from the companies, more tailored to where people are at. I'm not sure the on-prem thing is will for this class of products will pick up, but I think you'll see a little bit more creative. The other thing too is the Airtables of the world, the Notions of the world, the Figmas of the world, and those things, they're so close to the actual workflows that are happening with other things, is you'll see them kind of like it's a healthy pressure that Coda and Notion are putting into the space, because it allows like a product ops person to prototype an internal product at almost zero cost incremental cost for doing it. So,
And I'm going to use that just as a follow-on question. I sort of alluded to it earlier on, or maybe it was even before we went live when I was talking with Cliff. Will generalist tools win the day in the end? We've got a client using Monday, right? And they're building everything into Monday, Airtable, Notion, if we consider it that way, that type of stuff. I'm going to start with you, John, just because you sort of went there. Then I'm going to go to Cliff because he was shaking his head side to side.
yeah, as someone who's went so deep into Coda recently as a full-time person, like, again, I'll just put that as healthy pressure from those companies. There is a breaking point, but one of the nice things about prototyping in those tools is it forces you to ask yourself about how you're really working. It would be, and so I think there is some advantage to those types of generalist tools because they help you prototype around the way you want to work and then challenge your assumptions. Before, like May said, I'll throw it to May to get your thoughts on it. But like, I think there is a place for those tools for kind of prototyping out the world and seeing how big of a solution, because certainly you might find that your org is just too diverse and messy to pick one product that's going to solve all those problems. I don't know. What do you think, May?
I think it depends what problem you're solving with the thing that you're
Right.
trying to solve, right? So the thing about building your own is that what's the cost of my time to build it? Because if I'm building that solution, I am not looking at other problems in the space. I'm not solving literally anything else at the company, right? So
Right.
is this the most important thing we could be doing? And if the problem is we have an alignment problem, well, then maybe an off-the-shelf tool is what we need right now. Or maybe we just need to put up a page on Confluence or Notion or whatever it might be. But like, what is the problem you're trying to solve right now? And is it the most critical thing that we could possibly do to build out this custom tool that does the thing we want it to do in the
Yeah.
long run, right? So it's about prioritization of what is the most important thing now, but also, and like, so that's kind of one side of the coin. And the other side of the coin, kind of going back to how these tools are evolving, is we're talking about modularization and customization, right? We need our roadmap to do this, but also we need our prioritizations to look like this, and we need our launch alignment to look like that, right? These are all different pieces, and they can look very, very different. But my general beef with any of these product platforms is not that I hate them. It's I actually genuinely like them, and I really want to love them, right? Like I tell Becky Flint and like all these people from all these other tools, like, I want to love your tool. Please let me modularize it. Please don't make me implement the whole thing all at once. I just want a roadmap right now, and then I'll buy more of your stuff later.
That's exactly how I was successful at my last company in using Aha. Was we did not start off with any of the strategic planning, any of the extra stuff. We didn't connect it to Jira. We did nothing other than take what was in our PowerPoints, move it onto the game board, and then figure out a process to note each thing as it changed or updated. And that solved a ton of problems for us. It solved a lot of the alignment problems we were having with sales and marketing and support. It allowed us to have intelligent conversations about what had changed, not in an argument fashion, but like, this has changed. How does that affect you? Not we're not changing it back. That is not an option in this conversation. We've changed this. What do you now need from us, every other team, to be successful? The reason I was shaking my head though is because general productivity tools have won. This is a David and Goliath problem. Like, it's easy, right? We all know how to use Word and Excel and PowerPoint. We all know Excel is the be all end all tool that does anything and everything that anyone could ever want it to. They're basically free for any organization of any size that is bought into either the Google or Microsoft world. And they work. I hate to say it, but they do work. They do the thing that we need them to do. It may take us more time and effort and energy to update it all and make sure it's all reflected properly, but they solve the problem. So these tools have to solve that problem better, faster, more efficiently.
One interesting thing on that is that if you're at a shop that's always used the general productivity tools and you introduce a product management tool or platform or whatever it might be to solve that pain point of having to do it over and over again, the PMs are generally quite happy, cautiously happy, but
Cautiously
quite
optimistic.
happy. And it's actually really interesting to see that, like, that emotional shift. Jenny Wanger and I talk about this all the time, but when we talk about building product ops, what we're actually doing is building the product culture of the company, right? How people work is the culture of the company. The tools that you implement are just tools. They can be ripped out, whatever, but it doesn't change how people do and see and feel about product management and that excitement around it and that general culture across the whole organization, right? So if alignment is your problem and the general productivity tools aren't cutting it, you might need a shift. And if
Yeah.
that's a tool or that's a different tool or that's a different general productivity tool, go for it. Leverage whatever you need.
It's
This funny thing, there's
interesting.
probably like a Conway's law of these tools, which I think the paradox is that the more complex of a tool you need, the more that's probably a good clue that you should do something else. So
Yeah.
like I would say, Cliff, that like, these no-code tools are good because they remind me of Microsoft Access back in the day. You could do anything with Access. They're just like Access super powered mixed with spreadsheets, mixed with like Google Docs, right? They're great products for doing that. But one thing that I realized is that it's like, to May's point, you actually, if you're in a transition or a transformation to a new working model, you actually want to scaffold these tools, but then pull them away.
Yep.
There's a reason, like the underlying problem is that you have one person in product marketing that has 30 different product lines to watch over for.
Yeah.
That's the problem. And no one's talking, and it just manifests in the tools, right? So I think that that's actually an opportunity for these providers to do what May's saying, like stop adding new features to the product and start thinking about how your product is going to encourage the habits and rituals that you want for your team. How many of them have a like, oh, we reviewed this together as a group and made notes on it feature? Not as many as, oh my God, you can take insights now from this new weirdo AI product and pipe 1,000 customer feedback nuggets into your product. You'll only look at 1% of them anyway. So it's like, I think that that's an opportunity for the providers, basically.
It's interesting. Before the call, I was talking to May and I was trying to find a meme. And John, I thought it was a meme of yours. It was the bell curve meme with Excel on each end and product management tools or roadmap tools in the middle.
Can't take credit for that. That's really good. No, that's awesome.
I went through every picture you had on Twitter and I couldn't find it, so I realized it wasn't you. But it was, but the scaffolding is key. When I talk about Racy, I often quote Nanny McPhee, and she always says, when you need me, but do not want me, I'll be there. When you want me, but no longer need me is when I'm gone. And I feel like that's the same type of thing with the scaffolding where we need to put that in there. Steve, I want to ask you one question on this overall, question we've been talking about, but then pivot into my final question right now. So your take on, will generalist tools win? Do you think the purpose built? Is it a hybrid?
Well, I'll answer an entirely different question. It seems to me that we keep buying these communication tools and collaboration tools, thinking that will create collaboration and communication.
Yeah.
And, so I have this thing of, I'll just put this in Slack. My work here is done. And I hope that Grant will stumble across that message at some point, right? So these collaboration tools are not helping us collaborate. So I'll just say, that's kind of what I'm channeling John here a little bit. Ultimately, I think we need to learn without the tools. We need to learn to actually talk to one another. And I'm reminded of the 3 C's, that the card is the least relevant part of a story. The second C is conversation. Let's talk about this story so that everybody has the context necessary to do their work. instead of just throwing things over the wall. A JIRA ticket is irrelevant. What's relevant is the conversation about the ticket.
I love that. I thought you were going to go to your root canal story. Steve was he had a root canal yesterday. Was talking about how the doctor actually thanked everybody whenever they got a tool for them, and it was like good two-way communication. It made me think of the bear and Yes Chef.
You're doing great for having a root canal yesterday, Steve.
Yeah, you are.
So the last outside of our wrap. Outside the wrap up, when we're going to talk about takeaways from this, one question I wanted to ask is, where do you start? How do you start if you're thinking about blank slate? If people are going to say you went into a place they didn't have anything, or you went into a place and they let you just say we're going to start from a blank slate, where do you start? And I'm going to start with Cliff on that.
I'm probably going to steal May's answer. Honestly, you start by understanding what it is you're trying to do and how you do it already. Tools will not create an environment that doesn't already exist. And I have clients calling me all the time about, we need to communicate better. What tools should we use? I'm like, no, stop. Let's start by communicating better, and then let's adopt a tool that reflects our communication style. Right. I think that's one of the reasons why the notions and the codas are starting to become more popular, is because they encourage collaboration. But they're just encouraging it. If you don't have people that want to engage, it doesn't matter what tool you grab. If you don't have people that want to go to one source of truth for roadmaps, you're not going to solve that problem, right? And there are cultures where sales wants to talk to the product manager, period, end of story. And they will bug the crap out of you constantly. You need to fix that culture problem before you apply a tool to it.
I mean, I was in a B2B enterprise for most of my, product lines that were tens of hundreds of millions, not like companies that were tens of hundreds of millions.
Mm-hmm.
And a B2B enterprise deal where you're selling $1 million deals, it's a totally different environment than a B2B2C or a product led type stuff. And I completely resonate with that. And as the person who wrote the question, that's where I was hoping the answers would go. So John, if you want to build on Cliff, how do we do that? Or is there a different answer? Where's the place to start? Or
it starts with savvy, strategic, operational thinking, which is kind of a combination of service design and complexity thinking and product thinking and sort of traditional business analyst type thinking. I mean, there's a lot of skills mixed into that. Interestingly, a lot of product leaders don't necessarily have those skills. And that's okay. Their ideal would be just a simple thing. And they don't have that sort of platform thinking type thing. And so I think that whether you need to hire for it or you need to cultivate that internally or find the people that have that set of skills, it's a little bit of UX research in there too. Yeah. It's not just B2C product experience. You do need to understand and think in terms of platforms and connecting with your different constituencies internally and figuring out how you work. So extending on that idea that there's also a set of skills that are involved. Realistically, if you leave it up to the PMs and they're not applying product thinking internally or platform thinking, you're actually going to end up with a crappy tool because, process is bad.
Can I ask, while I've got this group on here, that we talked about, that figure out that process, how everything works, how the collaboration works. More often than not, I hear people just call it the SDLC. And I feel like SDLC is sometimes too blindered, but people use the term SDLC to mean the whole process. Is it, Cliff, you're on my...
Yeah, I'm shaking my head again. The SDLC is basically your interactions with engineering and development. That's the traditional definition and application of software development lifecycle. It's assumes people are doing all this stuff, and then it gets into engineering, and then it assumes people do all this stuff to get it launched to market. So that's way too narrow for me.
I agree. I've been hearing people call it the SDLC when thinking about the whole, but
I feel like we keep reverting back to terms that we used 15 or 20 years ago that we moved away from for a very good reason. And I don't get it, right? SDLC is way too narrow, and maybe people are redefining it. Maybe I'm being an old curmudgeon and thinking about it in ancient terms when people are using it to mean something else like MVP. But I think just starting with the word software development inherently limits it. Because we do much more. I mean, we do services. We do, we do product-led growth, which has other marketing aspects to it. We do and sale. Like, we don't just do software development, and that's, I think, one of the big problems. That's why 25% of executives don't understand what product managers do, because they think of it as software development, and it's so much bigger than that.
I'll take that as the answer because I don't want to waste any more time. We're running out of time. May, any thoughts on where to start, or if Cliff and John, product ops is where to start, right?
Two things. People ask me, what do I do every day? When I'm working in product ops, I say therapy.
Yes.
It's so much there. Everyone, because you're working on the systems, everyone comes to you and say, I'm struggling with the system. How do I deal with it? I'm struggling with this group of people. How do I deal with it? Right? It is so much therapy, so much that like I've actually considered becoming a product therapist, and I'm like, no, that's too much work. The second thing is there is an opportunity to use the tool to change the culture. Once you figured out what changes you need, and you say, well, we have an alignment issue, but that alignment issue is also blocked by several buy-in issues, the cost of the tool becomes a sunk cost, and you can say, we spent this much money on this tool, we have to change. Right? There are many, many ways to convince leadership that they need to change. And one of the things we can do is that sunk costs, or that cost, that investment. It's like, oh, we're not just investing in a product ops people, we're investing in a product ops people and a tool. And a part of this is to help us become better. And that helps you sell the vision. It helps you wrap it up in a nice little package. And that's one thing that the tool lets you do.
Yeah.
I love it. One thought that I had about that was one of my takeaways from this whole conversation is, think about a spectrum of the type of work you're doing, right? Ranging from like highly, highly, highly collaborative all the way to extremely transactional. One thing I think both the tool providers and then people internally can think about is, what are you trying to encourage? So for example, if you're trying to take something that should be highly collaborative and transactionalize it, that's going to go wrong. However, there are benefits to taking things that can be transactional and just automating them and making them easier. So I think that people get that mixed up in their head when they're buying these tools, and also the tool providers get it mixed up when they're offering the products. Like, there are things that PMs spend 3 hours a week on that ideally they would spend 3 minutes on. Make that transactional, make it fast, make it just work, save people time. And then on the flip side, if you're trying to encourage collaboration, use all those growth hacky product management skills or whatever, and do your job and create behaviors instead of I think a lot of the tools and a lot of teams get stuck in the middle. They don't acknowledge situations where they want to be more collaborative, where they're forced to be transactional. They don't acknowledge places where they should be transactional, where they're forced to be collaborative, and the tools that they can use to accelerate that. So I think that that's like one thought from this conversation that people can take away. Like, where do you need to be highly collaborative? Where should you be more transactional? And then use the tools to enable that.
I love it. Steve, I'm going to ask you quickly where do you start? If there's anything you would add, or do you think that Cliff, May, and John have done well? And then we'll move into those takeaways.
I think everybody's done a great job. I find myself all the way through this channeling a core belief that I know you and I both have, and probably I hope all of us, and that is, don't start with the solution, start with the problem.
Yeah.
I'm finding, most product leaders and many product managers start with the solution. God spoke to me in a dream and we need to have AI in our product. Well, hang on, what problem you're trying to solve? Well, the problem is we don't have AI in our product.
Yeah, I love it. So we're running out of time. John shared a key takeaway. Let's get everybody else a chance to start. Key takeaway or learning. Cliff, key takeaway or learning.
Find the right tool for the right problem.
Find the right tool for the right problem. I like the simplicity of that. May.
Product ops is about scaling better product management. How are you scaling better product management with your tool?
Always comes back to product ops. John, any other key takeaways outside of what you already shared?
No, those are yeah.
Okay.
Second or double down on what May said too.
Yeah. Steve, my friend.
Yeah, I'll just come back to start with the problem. I fear that most product leaders and all executives have no idea how software is built or how products are built, and the incredibly important role that product management has in defining whether this is software or hardware or services or something else. I think we all need to be well versed in how our products get built.
How the sausage is made. I love that. My key takeaway, it's going to be, it was to start with the culture, right? If we don't have the culture, if we don't have the process, the tools aren't going to do anything for us. And we're going to do that. What an amazing conversation. Many, many, many thanks to Cliff Gilley from Gartner. John Cutler, thank you for coming on. Hopefully we can get you back on for other topics. And of course, May Wong and my friend Steve. Amazing conversation. Next week, we're going to do OKRs. Ian Harvey, who's an OKR expert, who's been on the panels before, is going to join us. And that all starts on LinkedIn. So we put the questions in on Monday or so. And we have these amazing conversations on Fridays. And so thank you guys so much for a wonderful conversation. I learned a ton. I can't wait to do it again next week. Everybody have a great weekend. We'll see you guys next week.